What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So UFC 294 started off with a bang. And, you know, we were both really looking forward to the debut of Sharaputdin Magomedov. This guy had a lot of hype coming into the UFC, and he took on a very tough first opponent, Bruno Silva. Some of you may not know, but he actually took on Alex Pereira in his UFC debut and took him to decision. So Bruno Silva's as tough as they come. If you've got a newcomer that's got some steam behind him at 185, Bruno Silva seems to be the guy that can take him to decision in the first fight. So credit to Silva. He's always game, always tough. But this video is about the Shara Bullet.
Right.
And I think his future is very bright. I think the UFC is going to fast track this young man. He's got the look. He's got the social media following. He's from Dagestan, but unlike a lot of the Dagestani fighters, he's got a very high-paced striking game. Spends most of his time in Thailand. He's got some great front kicks, some great body kicks, creative combinations, starting with the kicks, going to the hands, finishing with the kicks. This guy was on his back at one point in time, was creative there. I'm very bullish about his future.
Very well said, and I'm so glad Sharaputdin is now an active fighter on the UFC's roster. I've been wanting to see him compete for a long time, and while I've gone back into the archives and found him fighting in this and that promotion all over the world, there's nothing that compares to fighting in the UFC, and you really get to see who is as good as advertised when they get to the UFC. I think that Sharaputdin Magomedov has everything the UFC wants in a fighter, and he's coming in with a whole lot of steam behind him. Clearly, they've got him on pay-per-views for a reason, even though he was the first fight of the night. And clearly, they see a lot of potential in him. He had a big social media going into this, and once the rumors were official that he was officially signed to the UFC, it just took off from there. I mean, we watch the analytics when we make videos of him, and they seem to do really well when we talk about Shara Bullet. So I'm excited to see what he does in the UFC. This is the true proving ground for all mixed martial arts. And after today's performance, I think the sky's the limit. Of course, we need to not fast track him the same way we did with Boris Chimaev or Alex Pereira, but he's got a very exciting fighting style. His striking is electric, and he's obviously got the look. He's got the it factor. So I think there's a lot of fun fights for Sharaputdin to have.
For sure. And I think the reason they fast-tracked both Alex and Chimaev were actually two different reasons. One was Chimaev showed very early on that he had the skill both on the feet and on the ground to compete with the elite of the elite, so they fast-tracked him in that sense. Also, he was always game and always saying yes, so when you do that, good things tend to happen. But Alex Pereira was fast-tracked for a different reason, and that was because Israel Adesanya was the belt holder at the time at 185, and there was that history there, and they wanted to put that together.
For sure.
For Sharaputdin, he's neither of the two. He's very lethal as far as the stand-up goes. We still need to see how he does when he gets taken down by an elite level grappler. Can he get himself back up? Will he get finished on the ground? Things like that. He doesn't have any beef with Sean Strickland, who's the current champion. There's a lot that needs to shake out at 185. So they can kind of methodically pick his next few fights. And I think they'll try to give him somebody just outside or just inside the top 15 next. And then if he does really well against that person, maybe they'll move him into the top 10 and so on and so forth. But the thing they need to be careful of is to not fast track him like Paddy the Baddy, because he's one of those guys who has that star it factor, massive social media following. People know his name, just like with Paddy. But that can be a double-edged sword in a lot of ways, because Paddy the Baddy, I think right now, if you were to throw him in with the top 5 at 155, he's going to struggle and he's going to come up short. Will that happen with Shara Bullet? I don't know. But I still think we need to see a couple more fights before we say this guy's got the star power and the it factor to be fighting the top 5. I'd like to see him win 2 or 3 more. I'd like to see him get some finishes, because that's what he's known for outside of the UFC. And one thing's for sure, just because you can finish people outside of the UFC does not mean that you can finish people inside of the UFC. There's a lot of guys in regional promotions that string together knockout, 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 and then it's straight decision when they get to UFC. It's a different animal. So I want to see a few more things out of Sharaputdin Magomedov, but the debut was great.
Yeah, truer words have never been said. And I think Sharaputdin has such an electric style that if they pick the right opponents for him, not saying give him easy opponents, but give him good strikers, give him people who are battle tested in the UFC, and let's see him perform. If he can add to this highlight reel, we're talking about somebody really special. He's willing to engage, a lot like Paddy the Baddy, and that will leave you to getting cracked every now and again. You know, we saw in this first fight that Sharaputdin took a few heavy shots off of Bruno Silva. Now, he's got a huge head, and it seems like he's probably going to be a pretty durable fighter with a great chin. But Bruno Silva is not one of the most elite strikers at 185. And I think if he's not fixing some of the defensive issues that he's got, or he showed us in his UFC debut, he could wind up in a little bit of trouble. But for right now, we've got an electric striker on our hands. We got a guy who I think could be a mega star in the UFC. And I don't think he needs to say much. I always say it's probably best for people to learn English if they didn't come from America, or if they didn't come from a country that taught them English growing up. I don't even know if this guy needs to learn English. Yeah. That scary Russian accent, that's all we need out of him. The face says it all. He's got a scary looking beard. I mean, amongst a bunch of guys that look pretty scary on this Abu Dhabi card, he might have looked, you know, aesthetically more frightening than everybody. And I didn't realize he was 6'2". So he's a big, tall body for 185. I don't think, you know, going into this fight that people thought he was actually as big as he is. But he's a big body. I think he's going to be greatly sized for 185. And there's some great strikers. There's some really fun matchups for him at 185. And I think if he's able to go out there and give us performances like he just did in Abu Dhabi over and over and over again, we're going to see a really exciting new prospect on our hands.
I'm excited.